Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Simon Hayward fled D.C. for mountain peace, he thought he'd left corruption behind. But in Silver Pines Ridge, one HOA queenpin had other plans. Fake parties, forged documents, and a battle for control. Welcome to the war for one man's porch and his freedom. When I left Washington, I thought I was leaving behind the political theater, the micromanagement, and the smug little bureaucrats with God complexes. After 2 decades auditing the finances of nonprofit organizations at the federal level, I'd seen enough to know I wanted peace. So I found it, or so I thought. My new home sat at the far edge of Silver Pines Ridge, a mountain enclave that looked like it had leapt out of a luxury real estate brochure. Winding roads, pine-covered hills, polished driveways, and people who probably counted their Botox units like calories. I didn't care. The house was mine. Legally, structurally, geographically, and, most importantly, jurisdictionally, it was outside the reach of the local HOA. I double-checked the title, triple-checked the plat map, even ran it by a real estate attorney. I wanted no part of any community that had the gall to dictate the shade of a mailbox or regulate lawn blade length. The first few weeks were peaceful, mornings on the deck with black coffee and silence. The occasional wave from neighbors walking their golden retrievers in athleisure gear, mostly older folks or high-income hermits like myself. I liked that, but then she arrived. Not physically. She'd always been there. But presence? That came later. Karen Drake. If a Mercedes SUV had a soul, it would be her. Platinum bob, pressed linen blouses, diamond studs that whispered legacy trust, and the look of a woman whose every breath was filtered through entitlement. She didn't knock the first time she came by. She glided in like she owned the sidewalk and the air above it. "Simon," she beamed, as if we were old friends at a country club brunch. "Simon Hayward, right? I'm Karen Drake. I'm the president of the Silver Pines Ridge Homeowners Association." I gave her a polite nod and a firm handshake, the kind that says, "Nice to meet you, but I'm not interested in whatever you're selling." "Beautiful spot you've got here," she said, eyes sweeping across my veranda like she was assessing a hotel suite. "That view of the valley, it's breathtaking. No wonder I told Mr. Spencer he'd just adore it." I raised an eyebrow. "Told him what exactly?" She gave a dazzling smile, all veneers and no warmth. "Oh, we're hosting a little private event tonight. Very select crowd, judges, state officials, a few influential types, and I said to Mr. Spencer, you simply must have your wine on Simon's veranda. The view at sunset, divine." I blinked. "Once." "Karen," I said, keeping my tone even, "this is private property. No one, not Mr. Spencer, not the Pope himself, is going to be on my veranda without my consent. I don't host events. I don't rent space. I enjoy peace." Her smile faltered for the briefest moment, then reshaped itself into something tighter. "I'm sure you don't mean that. Mr. Spencer is on the State Zoning Commission. It would be unwise to alienate someone like that." Now, I'm not easily provoked, but that tone, that subtle threat dressed as advice, it grated. "Well, Karen," I said, meeting her eyes, "he'll have to enjoy his wine elsewhere. I'm not interested in entertaining people I didn't invite, especially not on my deck, with my whiskey, under my roof." Her face stiffened, like she'd just bitten into a lemon and tried to pretend it was foie gras. "I see," she said. "Well, Simon, I hope this won't affect how welcome you feel here in Silver Pines Ridge. After all, we're a community." "Right," I said, already turning toward the door. "Good luck with your soiree." She didn't leave immediately. She lingered on my steps for a few seconds longer than necessary, as if trying to absorb ownership through proximity. I closed the door anyway. Inside, I poured myself a glass of bourbon, the kind I save for occasions when someone tries to piss on my fence and call it rain. I stared out at the tree line, my land, my rules. And yet, I had a sinking feeling that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Because women like Karen don't just take no for an answer, they file it under needs correction. The next day started as usual. Coffee, silence, pine trees swaying outside the glass wall of my kitchen. I had half a mind to forget yesterday's bizarre encounter with Karen, but something in her eyes, that barely contained fury behind a designer smile, stuck with me. Still, I wasn't going to let some suburban overlord throw off my peace. At least, not until I stepped outside around 10 and noticed the gate to my private drive standing open. Now, I don't leave things open, ever. I'm not paranoid, just experienced. A lifetime of auditing organizations that loved hiding sins in plain sight made me allergic to oversight failures, especially on my own land. I walked the length of the curved gravel path, each step a little heavier than the last, and when I turned the corner to where the house overlooked the valley, I stopped dead. There they were. 4 cars, expensive and polished, parked haphazardly near my retaining wall like it was valet night at a country club. Men in tailored suits milled about, wine glasses in hand. Someone had set up a folding table, white cloth, cheese platter, crystal decanter, and there were already damn wine rings on my teak deck rail. A woman I didn't recognize stood at the edge of my veranda, swirling a glass of Merlot like she owned the place. I didn't say a word at first, just pulled out my phone and started recording. One of the guests noticed me and offered a lazy wave, like I was the help. "Oh, are you Simon? Karen said you wouldn't mind." Karen, of course. I kept the camera steady as I approached. "This is private property. You are trespassing. You have exactly 30 seconds to gather your things and get off my land, or I'll let the sheriff explain it to you." That got their attention. One guy, the sort with a $5,000 watch and a $2 conscience, stepped forward, smug as hell. Whoa, let's calm down. We were told this was a communal use space, part of the HOA's guest access program. I laughed. Not a joyful laugh, the kind that says, "You just insulted both my intelligence and my blood pressure." "There's no such program," I said, already dialing. "And even if there were, this house, this lot, is not part of your HOA. Now pack up and move." They left, reluctantly and grumbling. One woman tried to take the wine with her. I let her. I'd seen what they did to the bottle. 10 minutes later, the sheriff's deputy arrived. I knew him, Deputy Armitage. Quiet guy, by the book. I showed him the footage, the open gate, the guests. He shook his head, muttering, "Karen again, huh?" "Again?" I asked. He gave a tight smile. "Let's just say you're not her first territorial misunderstanding. But this one's pretty blatant." He filed the report, took my statement, and offered to make a stop by her place. I told him not to bother. I had other plans. That evening, I installed a brand new smart gate system, keypad, biometric access, app control, synced every camera to cloud storage, added license plate recognition. I wasn't just protecting property anymore. I was drawing a line in steel and concrete. 2 days later, an envelope arrived. It wasn't certified mail, just a thick, smug packet printed on cream-colored stationery. The letterhead read, "Silver Pines Ridge Homeowners Association, Office of Legal Counsel." My eyebrows climbed halfway up my forehead before I even read the damn thing. The language was lawyerish, condescending, and peppered with phrases like communal privilege, shared visual easements, and my favorite, temporary fiduciary alignment with community hospitality efforts. Apparently, because my veranda provided a superior panoramic asset to the community, the HOA was asserting a limited access privilege, allowing official guests to make short-term use of the space during approved events. It cited some vague clause in the HOA charter, one that had nothing to do with my land and didn't apply to me in any way. And then, like a punchline delivered with a straight face, came the closing line, "We trust that your continued cooperation will reflect positively on your integration into the spirit of Silver Pines Ridge." I folded the letter carefully and placed it on the kitchen counter. Then I drafted my response. It wasn't polite. I cited deed records, boundary maps, title insurance, and a half-dozen court precedents. I ended it with the phrase, "Any further unauthorized use of my property will be treated as criminal trespass. Future attempts to fabricate legal authority over my land will be referred to the Colorado Bar Association for professional misconduct review." I signed it with the same calm Karen had shown on my porch. And then I went for a walk. Later that night, a neighbor I'd barely spoken to, a retired engineer named Russ, caught me by the mailbox. He leaned in, eyes darting like he was passing nuclear secrets. "Just so you know," he whispered, "she tried the same thing with the Kendricks 2 years ago. Claimed their patio was part of a community rest area. Tried to fine them for having private guests. What happened? They put up a privacy hedge and joined a class action lawsuit." He smiled, nodded, and walked away. I looked at the stars above the ridge and exhaled slowly. This wasn't over, but it had just become a war of documentation, and I had spent 20 years winning those. One week after the trespassing incident, I woke up to find an unmarked SUV idling across the street from my house. It sat there for over an hour, engine running, tinted windows reflecting the morning sun back at me like black mirrors. No one stepped out. No one approached, just watched. Then it pulled away. I dealt with worse, but it was the kind of silent warning that didn't need words. Later that day, I received another envelope. This one was certified, signed for, time-stamped, triple-stamped with legal pomp. The return address: Silver Pines Ridge Homeowners Association Legal Compliance Division. I opened it on the kitchen counter, one hand on the letter, the other already recording with my phone. It wasn't a cease and desist. It was something worse. Inside was a full packet of documents, stapled and tabbed. At the top, Temporary Guest Residence Agreement, Parcel 8D. That was my parcel, my land, my name, and under it, in bold, it read, "This property has been designated for short-term community-hosted hospitality use in accordance with HOA Legacy Resolution 14C, dated 2011. The signature line bore a scrawled mess of initials, not mine. But next to it, a printed name, Simon Hayward. I stared at it like it was a crime scene, because it was. The packet included a map showing my property boundaries redrawn to include shared perimeter leisure zones. There were highlighted clauses about rotating host privileges, elite guest accommodation, and something called the Silver Circle. Programmed, the whole thing was nonsense. A Frankenstein's monster stitched together from expired zoning drafts, old municipal forms, and legally meaningless HOA proclamations that had no binding power on me. I knew it. Anyone with a basic grasp of property law would know it. But it looked official. That was the point. Karen wasn't trying to win in court. She was trying to bluff me into silence, to build a paper trail in case she needed to confuse someone who didn't know better. Problem was, she'd picked the wrong mark. I spent the next 4 hours reviewing every line. My law background wasn't formal, but 2 decades of audit work in the DC nonprofit hellscape had trained me to spot financial and legal fraud like a bloodhound. And this was full of holes. The document relied on an obsolete zoning overlay from over a decade ago, back when my lot was still listed as undeveloped rural edge, a term that disappeared after the 2012 property reassessment. Worse, it cited a county hospitality rotation program that had been terminated in 2013 following a lawsuit over privacy violations. So how did Karen get her hands on it? I had a theory, and I didn't like it. That evening, I called a contact of mine at the Colorado Department of Community Records. Old friend owes me more than a few favors. I asked him to run a background search on HOA filings involving Parcel 8D. He promised to call back within 48 hours. Meanwhile, I wasn't going to sit idle. I sent a formal legal notice of property rights and zoning independence to the HOA's legal counsel. Included were scanned copies of my original title deed, county zoning maps from 2012 onward, a signed affidavit from the title company verifying exclusion from HOA jurisdiction. Then I filed an initial claim in small claims court to contest fraudulent usage of my name and property in documentation. That alone was enough to start a legal paper trail that couldn't be ignored. The next day, I filed a complaint with the state attorney general's office, specifically under the Division for Nonprofit Abuse and NPO Fraud. HOA or not, they operated as a registered nonprofit. That made them subject to scrutiny, and scrutiny is something I was very, very good at triggering. But Karen wasn't done yet. 2 nights later, I noticed subtle changes. A trail of small garden torches appeared along the hill path behind my lot. Decorative, battery-powered, the kind you'd see at a wedding or upscale backyard soiree. They led straight to my property line, then continued onto it. Someone had arranged a new path leading up toward my lower deck, quietly, without permission, as if it had always been there. I checked the footage from my back-facing camera. Sure enough, 3 men in dark polos and khakis had placed them the previous night around 3 a.m., working fast, wearing gloves. They knew exactly what they were doing. I pulled the footage, downloaded copies to 2 hard drives, and sent them straight to my lawyer. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was premeditated encroachment. Karen wasn't trying to pressure me. She was preparing for something. And then came the call. My contact from the records department confirmed what I suspected. The guest residence form had been pulled from a discarded planning archive. Karen had used her HOA credentials to submit a non-binding reclassification request on my parcel. It was never approved. It had no legal standing, but it was now on record, filed under pending consideration. She'd created a paper mirage and was hoping I'd get lost in it. I wasn't lost. I was furious. I don't scare easy, but I'm not foolish either. When someone starts laying down torches on your hillside like breadcrumbs to your property line, they're not planning a picnic. They're staging something, and they want an audience. So, I prepared. I checked every camera, synced every feed to cloud backups in 3 different jurisdictions, upgraded motion sensors, installed floodlights on the slope. It was overkill for a guy who just wanted to be left the hell alone, but clearly that wasn't in the cards anymore. Then came the invitations. Not to me, of course, but word travels. A neighbor, friendly enough guy named Lloyd with a thing for Scotch and county gossip, swung by under the guise of returning a package that had accidentally landed on his doorstep. He lingered long enough to casually mention, "Hey, just so you know, Karen's throwing another one of her galas this Saturday. Some kind of HOA honors night. Real who's who vibe. And I heard, well, your name came up." I stared at him. My name came up? He shifted awkwardly. "Well, not you exactly. Your property. She told some folks the lower deck's open for the reception. Said it's part of a shared use agreement. Something about a memorandum." Of course she did. Saturday came fast. By noon, I spotted delivery vans at Karen's house, a catering company, lighting crew, rental trucks, uniformed servers, golf carts. She was moving people in style. I stayed calm. Kept my camera feeds live on a monitor in the kitchen, brewed coffee, waited. At dusk, the lights began to appear on the slope. The very torches I'd left in place on purpose, each one now casting a golden glow, guiding guests straight through the tree line toward my back deck like it was a goddamn wedding aisle. I poured a whiskey, waited. At 7:15 sharp, the first wave arrived. Suits, gowns, pearl earrings, custom cufflinks, laughs too loud for real amusement. I recognized none of them, except one, Federal Judge Anthony Valdry, retired. Known for his iron backbone and intolerance for procedural theatrics. A man whose signature had once halted a multi-million-dollar embezzlement case I'd investigated years ago. He was walking down my slope with a glass of wine, chatting politely with a woman in a velvet wrap who looked like she'd fundraised for 3 failed senators. That's when I stepped outside. I didn't shout. I didn't wave. I just stood there, between them and my deck, holding a leather folder under one arm and a cup of black coffee in the other. The crowd slowed. Confused murmurs floated through the crisp evening air. "Good evening," I said. "If you've been invited here under the assumption that this is community property, you've been lied to." Someone laughed nervously. I kept going. "This land, this entire parcel is privately owned, legally excluded from Silver Pines Ridge HOA jurisdiction. You are currently trespassing. But I'm not here to shame anyone. I'm here to protect what's mine and ensure you understand the facts." I opened the folder and held up the document. This is a certified property deed, recorded, notarized, and verified. There is no guest easement, no agreement, no access rights. You've been misled. The guests stared, frozen. Some looked toward the slope, considering retreat. Others glanced toward the lighted path above, hoping Karen might appear and explain this mess. That's when Judge Valdry stepped forward. He adjusted his glasses, scanned the deed, and gave me a long, appraising look. "I wasn't told this was a private residence," he said. His voice was calm, judicial. Karen claimed this was part of a shared HOA retreat space. I should have known better. He turned to the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I suggest we remove ourselves immediately. This is not what we were promised." And like that, the facade cracked. People began turning back, wine sloshing, heels catching in the grass. One man muttered "lawsuit" under his breath. A woman in stilettos hissed. I knew this was shady. The slope became a strange procession of discomfort and retreat, like an elite pilgrimage heading shamefully uphill. Karen didn't show, but I wasn't done. The next morning, I drafted a formal letter summarizing the incident, including the names of attendees gathered from footage, screenshots of unauthorized entry, a notarized declaration of private ownership with time-stamped video evidence. I sent copies to the HOA board, county zoning office, and, just for flavor, the office of Judge Valdry. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, I received an envelope, hand-delivered, from Judge Valdry himself. Inside was a typed letter, Mr. Hayward, please accept my personal apology for the recent incident. I was grossly misinformed about the nature of the event and your property. I've already notified several members of the legal community who were present that evening, clarifying the circumstances. You conducted yourself with dignity. I commend your restraint. Respectfully, Anthony J. Valdry. Redders. I pinned the letter to the bulletin board in my study, next to the county plat map and the HOA's first threat. Karen had just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Now it wasn't just me watching, it was the legal community. And some of them had a lot more power than she realized. The days after the gala incident were quiet, but it wasn't the kind of quiet you enjoy. It was the kind that comes before a storm. I could feel it. Karen had gone too far, and she knew it. That meant she was either retreating or preparing something worse. I didn't wait to find out. With Judge Valdry's letter now firmly attached to my documentation wall, I set my sights on something more surgical. It was time to stop playing defense. I wanted to know how Karen had orchestrated this illusion of authority in the first place. That meant one thing: follow the money. See, HOA financials are supposed to be public to their members. But even non-members can request access through specific county mechanisms, especially when there's suspected fraud. And lucky me, I had enough legal breadcrumbs to qualify. I filed a formal request for HOA's financial disclosures under Colorado's nonprofit transparency laws, citing recent public misrepresentation, fraudulent event coordination, and unauthorized use of private land. They had 10 business days to respond. On day 4, I received a USB drive. No sender, just a manila envelope left in my mailbox with a sticky note. Look at Q3 and Q4 ledgers. A friend. I ran the files through a clean system, offline, isolated. What I found made my skin crawl. The HOA ledger looked normal at first. Operational budgets, landscaping costs, maintenance agreements. But then I spotted the Silver Pines Hospitality Fund, not mentioned anywhere on their public site, not part of the official annual reports. And it was bleeding money. Over $60,000 in event allocations over 2 quarters. Labeled vaguely, guest services, community entertainment, resident engagement. Dig deeper, and the trail led to 3 shell nonprofits: Evergrowth Fellowship, Ridgeview Culture Circle, the Community Alliance Initiative, all received. Checks from HOA accounts, all registered to the same mailing address, a P.O. box in Boulder. I cross-referenced those names with the state's charity registry. Only one was active, the other 2 inactive. No board, no employees. But they had bank accounts. And those accounts had one common signatory: Benjamin Drake, Karen's son, a 27-year-old consultant who'd been listed as Strategic Operations Manager on HOA newsletters nobody actually read. It was textbook fraud, money laundering through charitable fronts. I'd seen it before, but never this up close. Karen wasn't just a petty tyrant with an HOA complex. She was running a goddamn personal revenue stream under the guise of community outreach. Now I understood the desperation. My deck wasn't about prestige, it was bait. A set piece for these high society events that lured in donors and sponsors who thought they were giving to legitimate causes. And when I cut off access, I didn't just ruin her party, I cut the pipeline. The next morning, I called an old contact, Amy Caldwell, senior investigator at the Colorado Nonprofit Enforcement Division. We hadn't spoken in a few years, but she owed me for a whistleblower tip I gave her in D.C. I sent her a digital package with everything: ledgers, the shell charities, the false documents, and footage from the gala. Her response came 3 hours later. This is damning. If even half of this is real, and it looks real, we're launching a formal inquiry starting immediately. I thanked her and prepared for Karen's retaliation. It came in the form of a surprise inspection. 3 men in matching polos and clipboards showed up at my gate. Routine HOA compliance check, one said flatly, without even glancing at my gate cameras. I nearly laughed. You do realize I'm not under HOA jurisdiction, right? They didn't flinch. Just started taking photos of my yard, the siding, my satellite dish. I didn't stop them. I filmed every second. One of them tried to look inside my garage. I cleared my throat. That's felony trespass, gentlemen. Want to make this official? They backed off, but I wasn't done. I pulled the footage, packaged it neatly, and emailed it straight to Amy Caldwell, along with a timestamp and cross-reference to the HOA board meeting, minutes where Karen had ordered randomized curbside surveys of community standards. By Friday, things escalated. I received a certified letter from the HOA's legal team, this time accusing me of obstructing community integrity initiatives and malicious interference with board operations. It read more like a hissy fit than a legal notice. But I'd had enough. I filed 2 new complaints. 1, a claim in district court for defamation, harassment, and property invasion, naming Karen Drake personally. Dusra, a petition to the county auditor to review HOA's nonprofit status, citing evidence of fund misappropriation, shell entity fraud, and private enrichment. That night, I installed one more camera, pointed directly at the back trail with motion-activated audio capture. I didn't care if it felt like overkill, because Karen wasn't just trying to harass me, she was trying to protect a lie. And I had just ripped the lid off it. I've always said courtrooms aren't where truth lives. They're where it's forced out, piece by piece, under oath and under pressure. And I was ready to squeeze. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a rainy Thursday morning in late October, the kind of day that made suburban communities look washed out and miserable, which fit the mood perfectly. I arrived early, clean-shaven navy suit, all documents organized and tabbed in a black leather binder, calm, controlled. Karen arrived late. She wore a cream-colored power suit, high heels that clicked like gunshots down the courthouse hallway, and a pair of oversized sunglasses she didn't take off until she sat down. Beside her, a smug attorney with perfect hair and an ego big enough to need its own license plate. His name was Brad Wexler, partner at some HOA defense boutique in Denver, the kind that existed solely to threaten residents into submission and nickel and dime people over mailbox colors. Wexler opened with bravado. He called the case a gross overreaction, claimed Karen had acted in good faith, and that any usage of my land had been misunderstood cooperation under a long-standing community partnership tradition. He waved around a stack of HOA bylaws like they were gospel. Then it was my turn. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't grandstand. I just walked through it, step by step. The trespassing, the fake documents, the forged temporary guest residence agreement, the fabricated maps, the gala ambush, the financial records, the shell nonprofits, the signature of Benjamin Drake, and then the letter from Judge Anthony Valdry. When I handed that to the judge, an older woman named Elsie Burnett, sharp as razors and twice as cold, her eyes narrowed. This letter was not filed with the exhibits. Wexler objected. It came after the filing deadline, I said, but it's signed, notarized, and directly relevant to the misuse of my property. You'll note that the judge was personally misled into attending an unauthorized event held under false legal premises. Judge Burnett read it slowly, then placed it face down. Overruled, she said. We'll allow it. Wexler squirmed. I kept going. I pulled out the county zoning maps and title records, pointed out the exact borders of Parcel 8D, my parcel, and how it was never legally annexed into the HOA. Then I showed the 2011 zoning overlay that Karen had dug up, and the letter from the state archives verifying its expiration. Finally, I introduced my contact from the Colorado Nonprofit Enforcement Division. Amy Caldwell had issued a formal letter of inquiry, confirming an ongoing investigation into HOA financial misconduct and the use of HOA funds to pay entities tied to Karen's immediate family. Judge Burnett's expression didn't change, but I could tell. The air had shifted. Wexler tried to recover, claimed I had an axe to grind, and was trying to humiliate an upstanding civic leader. Then Karen opened her mouth. Big mistake. She stood, visibly shaking, and said, "This man has done nothing but fight against the spirit of our community. He thinks just because he has a nice view and a little legal background, he can act like a tyrant. We have traditions, relationships, expectations." "Ms. Drake," the judge said quietly, "do you have any documentation proving shared ownership or jurisdiction over the plaintiff's property?" Karen looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. "Well, not formal documentation, but that will be sufficient." And just like that, the mood collapsed. The judge recessed the hearing and said she would issue a written ruling within a week. It came in 3 days. Karen Drake and the Silver Pines Ridge HOA were found liable for trespassing, document falsification, and intentional misrepresentation. The forged guest agreement was declared legally void and defamatory. I was awarded $1.2 million in damages, $800,000 for reputational and property-related damages, $400,000 in punitive damages. Most importantly, I was granted full legal severance from any present or future HOA association claims. No fees, no inspections, no oversight. Ever. The next morning, Karen's lawyer filed an appeal. But it didn't matter. The investigation into the HOA was already underway, and Karen was no longer just a nuisance. She was a liability. The morning after the ruling, I found a single white rose taped to my gate. No note, no name, just the flower. Neighbors like to pretend they're above theatrics, but in places like Silver Pines Ridge, symbolism is currency. I left it there, let the wind strip its petals off one by one. Karen's reign had cracked, but now it was collapsing. Within 48 hours, the local news got hold of the court documents. I didn't talk to them, but someone did. The segment ran that Friday. HOA president sued over fake documents and private land use. They showed drone shots of my house, footage from the public court records, and even a still of Judge Valdry's letter. That one stung. By Saturday morning, 3 HOA board members resigned for personal reasons. Another, Martha Wexley, the treasurer, filed a motion to distance the HOA from Karen entirely, citing ethical concerns and a loss of confidence in leadership. That same day, 2 squad cars rolled up to the HOA administrative office, an overgrown converted garage behind Karen's house. Uniformed officers walked out carrying 3 boxes and a desktop tower, search warrant in hand. That night, a formal press release was issued by the Colorado Department of Regulatory Agencies. The nonprofit status of Silver Pines Ridge HOA had been suspended pending audit and investigation. And, the cherry on top, an arrest warrant for Karen Drake. Charges including fraudulent misrepresentation, unlawful use of charitable funds, falsification of zoning documentation, and unauthorized access to private property. Bail was set at $500,000. When they came for her, she was dressed for brunch. She tried to talk her way out of it at the curb in front of her home, hands waving, sunglasses still on. The cuffs were quiet. The camera flashes weren't. It made the 6 o'clock news. Again. The footage was almost surreal. The queen of the HOA, the master of the community, stuffed into the back of a sheriff's cruiser like a shoplifter who got too clever. The HOA, meanwhile, was bleeding members. Residents lined up at the community center to vote on immediate HOA suspension and full internal audit. It passed in less than 3 hours. At the same meeting, someone brought forward a printed copy of my public complaint, slapped it on the table, and said, "This man was right. We owe him more than a settlement." I didn't attend that meeting, but I got a letter, handwritten, signed by over 50 residents. "You did what the rest of us were too scared to do. Thank you. It was nice. But I didn't want thanks. I wanted this finished." Over the next few weeks, I met with state auditors, prosecutors, even a couple of federal agents who'd been watching the shelled charity angle for months. Seems Karen's nonprofit circuit had been on a quiet watch list after a similar scam was uncovered in Arizona. What started as a local HOA war had now become part of a multi-state financial investigation. I handed over everything: the USB drive, the footage, the forged maps, every passive-aggressive HOA letter Karen had ever sent me, archived, printed, dated. A month later, the HOA board was formally dissolved. The county revoked their registration. All operations ceased. Silver Pines Ridge, for the first time in 2 decades, became an HOA-free zone. Residents split into 2 camps, those who were shocked and those who were silently relieved. The second group was bigger. Karen pled not guilty at her first hearing, but the DA had a lineup of witnesses, ledgers, and digital breadcrumbs with her name all over them. Her son vanished from public life. The 3 shell nonprofits were closed, and the accounts frozen. But the real win, for me, anyway, total independence. My property was now legally isolated from any future zoning agreements or association initiatives. No committees, no inspections, no suggestions, ever again. When the dust finally settled, I did the only thing that made sense. I took down the cameras, tore out the smart locks, tore out the keypad, rebuilt my fence by hand, and I put up a new sign by the gate, painted wood, bold white letters. No mistaking it. Private property. Not for Karen's guests. Not today. Not ever. The silence felt different now. Not the tense, coiled stillness of watching a storm approach. Not the icy, waiting for the next move kind of quiet. This was earned silence, real, like the land itself had exhaled with me. I still woke early most mornings, habit of an old life. But instead of reviewing financial disclosures or preparing legal briefs, I brewed coffee and stepped out onto the veranda. My veranda. Clean, unstained, unoccupied by anyone in cufflinks or fake smiles. No wine rings, no catered trays. Just pine trees, wind, and the kind of view that doesn't need to be shared with politicians or HOA royalty to be valuable. I thought the story would end there. Me, free from Karen, free from HOA interference, sitting comfortably with a 7-figure settlement and an ironclad property status. And yet, it didn't end. Not exactly, because people started coming. Not uninvited strangers or weekend gala zombies, but neighbors. Quiet ones, honest ones. Folks who'd spent years keeping their heads down, paying HOA dues like taxes in a feudal state, pretending to like Karen's community outreach while resenting every restriction on their porch lights or garden gnomes. They asked questions. Real questions. How did you know what to look for? What if I think they charged me for a fence I didn't approve? I signed something years ago. How do I undo it? I didn't plan to become a resource, but after 2 or 3 conversations, it was inevitable. I opened up the old guest house on the edge of my property, rewired the internet, set up a desk, a whiteboard, 2 chairs, and a printer. Put a sign on the front that read, Civic Integrity Research, by appointment only. It started as a joke. Then came the first HOA victim from the next town over. Then 2 more. A contractor who got stiffed on a community center upgrade. A woman whose HOA claimed she owed $10,000 for non-compliance. A couple who were harassed after refusing to donate to a silent auction. They brought boxes, PDFs, phone records, letters, fake fines, board minutes. And I listened, reviewed, annotated, wrote formal responses, walked a few through filing small claims. One even ended up leading a recall election in her own HOA. She won. Turns out people want to fight back. They just don't know how. Karen taught me a lot. Not about power, but about the vacuum she operated in. People let her rule because silence is easier than conflict, and shame feels inevitable when the system speaks in legalese and veiled threats. But once someone proves the system is breakable, the fear dies fast. As for Karen, her case went federal. Wire fraud, nonprofit tax violations, and a nice little conspiracy enhancement thanks to her son's accounts. Her plea deal spared her prison time, but she lost her home, her voting rights, and her reputation. She lives somewhere in Arizona now, if the rumors are true, runs a consulting business, but not for long because the feds don't forget. I saw one of her old gala guests a few months ago, Mr. Franklin, the zoning commissioner who used to hover around her like a lapdog in a tailored suit. He stopped by my gate, leaned over the rail, and said, "Hayward, I underestimated you." I smiled. Most people do. That's how I win. He didn't argue. The world spins on. HOA boards rise and fall, and somewhere, someone is probably trying to enforce mailbox color compliance on a 74-year-old widow. But not here. Not on Parcel 8D. Not anymore.